Hi, everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology. It's March 28th, Wednesday, and I'm talking today about the Venus-Uranus conjunction, which is happening today, this evening. If you're on East Coast time, it's later this evening. It'll be a little bit earlier if you're out on the Pacific Coast. Otherwise, it kind of lines up differently depending on where you are in the world. But here in the United States anyway, it's this evening. So Venus-Uranus conjunction, we're going to talk about that today. And we're also going to talk just a little bit about why one might enjoy studying ancient astrology and what you need to know before diving into the study of Hellenistic astrology in particular. Oh gosh, my wife is vacuuming. Hold on. No big deal. She was like, oh, whoops, sorry. Okay, so a recap. We're going to talk about Venus conjunct Uranus today in Aries, and then we're going to talk about what you might need to know before studying ancient astrology, why you might be interested in it, what the courses are like that I teach. So that's what we're looking at. First of all, let's start off with Venus and Uranus. They're getting together today in the sign of Aries, and that's going to happen once a year, right? As the Sun and Venus go very closely together through the zodiac, once a year we're going to get a conjunction between Venus and Uranus. And then throughout the year we also get squares or oppositions between Venus and Uranus. And really all of the quadrature aspects, meaning the four hard aspects, conjunction, square, opposition, and the last quarter square, all of those aspects are basically, they all have the similar feeling. You can, kind of hash out some of the differences between, say, a conjunction, an opposition, or a square. There's some, minor differences, but the archetypal qualities coming together is what really matters. That's what is it's the most important thing to focus on, is just what does Venus represent? What does Uranus represent? What does it mean when the two of them get together in a combination? And then you look at the sign quality. So you're going to look at Aries to say, well, what is Venus like when she's in Aries? What is Uranus like when Uranus is in Aries, and what have you? So I wrote about this today already, but I'm making a little video for people who might be interested in going a little deeper with it. So let's start with Venus. We'll just go, and I kind of did this similarly in my written post today. Venus is love, and Venus is harmony. So love and harmony mean the bringing together of things into mutual understanding, cooperation, friendship, love or romance, anything from a contract or a written agreement where people are agreeing to something, to falling in love, or to the bonds of a friendship. Those are all Venus things. We'll just start there. Uranus, on the other hand, is one of the things that Uranus represents is unexpected disruptions and severing. So when there's sort of unexpected, sharp, distinct, unpredictable, and somewhat erratic things that interrupt, cut, or separate or divide. That's all Uranus. Uranus has a kind of Mars-like flavor to it. Sometimes you hear astrologers saying Uranus is the higher octave of Mars, stuff like that. There's definitely some truth to that. So when you put those things together, one of the things that happens, especially when you get both of them in Aries, which is Mars's sign, which emphasizes that cutting and dividing, or confronting, or piercing, or penetrating, then what you get is you get disruptions, unexpected disruptions in relationships, or unexpected disruptions to agreements, or the unexpected disruption of harmony. Now that sounds kind of rough, right? It is. This is not an easy transit in that respect. And this is one of many different ways that the transit can manifest. But that's something to watch for. So, for example, you might get a letter from someone in your email unexpectedly saying, I have to cancel today. Very small instance. But maybe you'll say, well, yeah, what's up? Everything okay? And they'll say, oh, my kid injured themselves at school, or something that's unexpected and sort of disruptive to something you're trying to do that's Venetian. It's all about harmony and a sort of lovely vibe you're trying to create or maintain, and it gets interrupted by Uranus. So that's one thing you can watch for, all sorts of unexpected or erratic interruptions to lovely Venetian harmonized things. Venus is already in her exile in the sign of Aries, Mars's sign. So she's already in territory that is rough for her because she's more, and I personify with a he and she, but it's sort of genderless in another sense, but yin and yang, you can think of them like. But Venus is, the goddess, right? So she brings things together. And in Mars's sign, you're dealing with, similar to Uranus, you're dealing with the god of war, cutting, severing, dividing, penetrating, piercing, analyzing, being incisive. So those are Mars qualities. Those aren't easy for her, right? So relationships can be a little strained right now anyway. Anything that involves beauty or aesthetics or design or taste or love or relationship, or harmonizing, agreements, diplomacy can all be a little strained. Case in point, what's the big news story for Trump ever since Venus entered Aries? I mean, it's not the first time it's come up for him at all, but the real emphasis has been on what's her name? Stormy Daniels, this woman that he had a connection with and tried to cover it up and all this stuff. So there's the element of women and difficult, stressful relationship situations that one might find oneself in, and that's a gross example, right? Like that's a very mundane, like everyone knows that if you've turned on the news at all. Maybe, hopefully, you haven't turned on the news because sometimes it's not worth turning on. But at any rate, so you can see those kind of strains already with Venus in Aries, tensions and discordancy and intensity and catharsis and confrontation, some level of power struggle. Those are all things that are present with Venus in Aries. Venus in Aries is like the person who enters a conversation almost sometimes with like a chip on the shoulder, like you seeing or perceiving confrontation, hostility, competition where there isn't any sometimes. Those can be the detrimental qualities of Venus in Aries. Of course, Venus in Aries can represent courage and bravery and beauty kind of combining. So sometimes in our relationships, we have to be brave with one another. We have to confront things and we have to catalyze one another to grow as human beings. So that's a good reason to have Venus in Aries. But when you add that in with Uranus, who's like very strongly disruptive and erratic and likes to suddenly interrupt or cut into things, especially the status quo. Oh, it's a nice peaceful day. Here's a freight train of activity that just whips in, and that can be Uranus, and very electric and kind of really stimulates and shakes things up. So those are the dynamics that are happening right now. And as we said, it's a little difficult for Venus already being in Mars's sign. And then you add Uranus being in Aries and you get just that extra added kick. We've had Uranus in Aries now for, going on 8 years. And it's about to change signs into Taurus in the middle of May. So that's a big deal. When an outer planet changes signs, especially if you use whole sign houses, it's going to change houses, makes a big splash when it first changes houses. That's something ancient astrologers paid a lot of attention to. So there's a Uranian change happening right now anyway. There's a revolution of Uranus itself as a planet. It's at those late anaretic degrees, which I've talked about in previous talk. So it's about to become a more potent, kick the door in kind of Uranus in the next month or two anyway. And especially if you have planets in the late degrees of cardinal signs, you're really getting something right now. You're really getting it from Uranus right now. So at any rate, all of that adds together to make this a pretty intense dynamic today. It's pretty fleeting though, right? Like Venus will be on and into Taurus in a few days. Things will feel a little bit more stable with Venetian things. I've waited, for example, in my house, we have to replace some blinds. We're thinking about getting some carpet here or there, preparing for baby to come this summer. And I've been specifically holding off on waiting for anything related to aesthetics, design, beautiful things, etc., until Venus enters Taurus, because I've been feeling the impulse of Venus, like fix the house, beautify it, make it nice, get it ready. and that, that Venus in Aries can be a little impulsive. Sometimes you end up picking like ugly furniture, or you make a you pick up you pick up an ugly person when you're out some night, like ugly inside or outside, I don't know. But just to be careful with being impulsive with Venetian things in general right now. And then you can also just look at Uranus and Venus together, and also look at other things that they represent and then combine them. So for example, Venus is, let's say, sex, romance, desire, and beauty or appearance. Uranus is emancipation, revolution, breaking the status quo, etc. So you could have a kind of beauty revolution or an aesthetic revolution where you're completely revamping your style, taste, appearance, and in a very sudden way. Be careful, because this is the kind of transit where, I wanted to shave my head because I do that. I grow out my hair long and then I shave it back and forth. I've done it for years now. But you might shave your head and realize you didn't want to do it. You know what I mean? So you have to be careful about those things. But I have a client of mine who has Venus in Aries, and she got the conjunction from Uranus, and she shaved her head and she loves it. Sometimes it's bold, it's tough, it's making a statement, it's something, but it's artistic, or it's something involving your aesthetic or your appeal or your look or your vibe. And I got to change it. And maybe with Aries, I got to make a statement. I have to kind of, punch life in the face a little bit. You're kind of like that. That's the mood. All right. So we also have to be very careful about burning bridges, right? You're mad. Someone says something. You're in a bad mood. It's the last straw. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Screw you. I'm done with you. I'm done with this. Get out of here. Let's forget it. That quick termination of things that you have to be very careful of. These are cyclical dynamics in life. If you think it's going to solve your problems, me or you or anybody, if it's going to think it's going to solve our problems by you're fired, right? Well, it's not really. That's not working in the world right now. The whole I don't like you, I'm separate than you, get rid of you, I'm over here, you're over there, build a wall. The whole thing doesn't work. Now, one would think Uranus is about tearing down walls, not building them. But don't get fooled, because in every major revolution in the world, historians have shown us, sociologists tell us as well, you get involved in a revolution, the level of enthusiasm that you have going up will be met by the level of contractiveness that you have when the enthusiasm naturally wanes. So when we make big moves, big statements, big radical decisions to change everything, like the French Revolution, the American Revolution, there are moments of liberation. That's important, and I'm not suggesting we should do nothing. Liberation is natural. It's a part of the cycles of life. But we should be aware of the fact that there is the tendency, if we get caught up and lost in the spirit of revolution, to kind of smash things. And that eventually, that smashing of something that we don't want anymore, the anger and the intensity of it, it leads us back down into a contractive period where whatever the new norm is, whatever the new thing is that we find on the other side of the wall we've just smashed, on the other side of it is the contractiveness, a new conservatism, a new rigidity, a new I have all the answers, and a new attempt to make an empire that lasts forever, that has perfect control, that provides me with all that I need. We are constantly in the business of trying to solve our problems by looking to the future and trying to break down whatever we think in front of us is most prohibitive in order to have a better future or a more free or liberated state. Now, there are some things that naturally need to fall down. For example, the civil rights movement, right? It's a pretty good wall that got knocked down there, and there's others that need to get knocked down. But we have to be careful of all different kinds of movements, personal, social, political, whatever, astrological. For example, traditional astrology kind of a renaissance in the modern era, like, oh, it's traditional astrology. But whereas it's exciting and new and interesting, you can immediately collapse into this being the new dogma, and that's been something that happened in the French Revolution, the American Revolution, all sorts of things. So you're thinking also of this because Uranus in Aries is going to switch into a feminine sign, which means the new revolution is going to start becoming contractive rather than active. Or you could say it's going to become more receptive, passive, inert, bringing energy in toward the center rather than pushing it out, centripetal rather than centrifugal. So that's happening right now as well. So you have to be very careful, because while Uranus in Aries is culminating, the temptation to smash things down, right, and break through, be careful, because once Uranus enters Taurus, you're going to get a whole different kind of revolutionary energy. It's going to be more not conservative in the political sense, but conservative in the sense of trying to pull back inward. And that's going to be the revolution. So my friend Shireen and I talked about this yesterday on our podcast. She's another astrologer. And she was saying, I think that there's a potential with Uranus entering Taurus that we get back to nature a little bit, and that becomes the real revolution. The breakdown or slow structural decay of online addictions, might become more prevalent in the mass consciousness, to basically unplug. And that's Taurus. That's the revolution of Taurus. So at any rate, with that kind of change coming, you also just have to be aware, generally speaking, of where both Venus is heading and where Uranus is heading. Venus is going to her sign, which is not the god of war, right? She's not so much into all of that. All of the kick down the door, put your enemy on that side, blow, if you don't like him, devastate what he's doing. And that's the mood that we see in the world right now. That's why there's so much terrorism and public shootings and everything, because it's me versus the other person. This is Uranus in Aries, the defiant rebel outsider who's got a gun. You know what I mean? That's all about to shift in it. And I think it's going to be a good thing, but I think it'll take some people by surprise as to how innovative it becomes to get grounded again, how revolutionary it is to unplug. These kinds of revolutions are also coming, and what's gonna come with it is also more awareness of the earth, of the feminine, of nature. So this Me Too thing that we see, for example, with in the past year, right? This has been flavored by Uranus and Aries, which is good. It kicks it off, it gets it started. But watch how that starts to, all these changes we've seen, all the movements that we've seen, the voices that have been lifted, you're going to see actual structural transformations, deep structural transformations, and resistance to deep structural transformations when Uranus is in Taurus. So knowing that that's where it's all heading, you got to keep the big picture in mind. Today might seem like a small thing. It might just be an email, it might just be a mood, but watch for Uranus and Venus together, and then watch what happens as the energy and mood shifts with regard to Venetian things in the next few days as Venus enters Taurus, and then in the middle of May when Uranus enters Taurus as well. So that's just some stuff to think about. Now, I wanted to tell you a few things about why you might enjoy studying ancient astrology and what my class is like if you're interested in it. So I'm really passionate about ancient astrology, Hellenistic astrology in particular, although all forms of traditional astrology, including horary astrology, which is totally beautiful. And the reason that I'm really passionate about it is because most people don't know anything about it. And I've been practicing astrology full-time, teaching full client load for many years, until all of a sudden one day I was like, oh, there's a whole different way of doing astrology. You're kidding me. I met somebody at an astrology meetup group who said, I'll trade you a reading for a reading. You do a reading for me and I'll do a reading for you. And I don't often do that, but this person was particularly smart and compelling. So I said, okay. And I got a horary reading from him, which is a kind of medieval predictive form of astrology, and he predicted something that was 100% accurate and very beautiful in the way that he delivered it. And then I gave him a reading, and we became friends. And then I started studying with him. And then I just started branching out from there to study all different forms of traditional astrology. Traditional astrology is, first of all, one of the things that most people don't know is that modern astrology, the way that most of what people understand and think about astrology, is not the only form of astrology out there. And while ancient astrology is not like completely different from modern astrology, there are some major differences. And the thing that I'm most passionate about is trying to teach people about those differences so that they can have a broader and deeper understanding for the total field of astrology. I'm of the belief that when you get to know something over time, one of the things that makes something grow in your heart is differentiation. So let's say, for example, you start off and you have a taste for cooking. You like to cook. Over time, the natural thing that happens to people when they invest more of their time and love and attention into a subject like cooking is that they're gradually going to start to diversify their palate. And as they diversify their palate, they're going to get to be able to identify more complex combinations of things. Ancient astrology, to keep with the analogy, is to me like the diversification of the palate that happens over time. It's a little deeper, it's a little bit more intricate, it's a little bit subtler, but for people who love astrology, if you get a good introduction to it and you get a good survey of it, forever your practice, whatever form of astrology you practice, forever your practice will be more diverse, and it'll be enhanced. You will be a better astrologer. You will know more about astrology if you take the time to study what our ancestors were doing and how it differs from what we do today. Now, I teach ancient astrology for modern times, which means that the course is designed to not just be a stuffy old traditionalist class. All right, so sometimes people don't like traditional astrology. It's like it's just a list of rules. It's just a bunch of prescriptive rules. Unfortunately, some of the way, and I'm going to be just totally honest here without meaning any disrespect to anybody, but unfortunately, some of the people attracted to traditional astrology, generally speaking, are people who don't mind reading really dense ancient manuscripts, right? They're not afraid to open a textbook by someone with a name like Rhetorius or Antiochus. For a lot of people, that's like, nope. Nobody named Ucacus, like no Ucacus in anything I'm going to read. And I get that. That's totally legitimate. For whatever reason, I happen to be somebody who has a brain that likes to read things from the past. It's always been accessible to me. I have the moon in Taurus rising. I have moon in Capricorn in the 9th house. But I also have sun in Cancer in the 3rd. So part of my mission in life is also to communicate sort of old traditional stuff, which I've done in a variety of different settings in my life, to people in a way that is comforting, gentle, nourishing, and accessible. So that's what I feel like my calling is. So traditional astrology is so much more than a list of rules. It's something that's going to complexify and diversify and deepen your love of astrology. And it's going to show you how different some of the different historical time periods of astrology and how they practiced and what they believed and what they thought and how they used signs and how they used planets and how they used houses, what they thought about aspects. It's very, very different. I promise you this, no matter if you're a committed evolutionary astrologer, if you're a committed psychological or archetypal astrologer, learning what traditional astrologers were doing will only enhance whatever form you're practicing, and it will make you more cognizant of the field as a whole. Let's use another analogy. The most masterful musicians in the world, speaking of rules, ancient astrology is filled with a boatload of rules. However, not all rules are used at all times. So think of a masterful musician. Think of some of the most masterful musicians that you know of, right? From any era, any genre, whatever. A masterful musician who innovates, who creates something new, is someone who knows how to use the rules of music, scales, tone, timing, technique. They know how to use the rules of music according to time, place, and circumstance, and they know how to do it with inspiration in their heart in order to do profound things. It's my very firm belief, I'm so committed to this, that when you learn ancient astrology, you're not just learning a set of rules. You're learning that what ancient astrologers did with this elaborate language is they treated it like music, and they were really masterful, intricate musicians. And so ultimately, learning ancient astrology is very similar to learning how to use a much broader set of tools, and some of them are much subtler and more precise. So, that's part of it. Another thing is just learning about the major philosophical schools and what they believed about the soul and what they believed about reincarnation and how they treated the nodes of the moon versus how we treat the nodes of the moon, or what they considered a planet to do and what a house was. Why are siblings associated with a third house? Why is money associated with the second house? The language of dignities, planets in exaltation or fall or rulership or detriment. What does this language mean, and why was it even there to begin with? So most of the time, unfortunately, people who have been really interested in traditional astrology have been people who don't mind reading old stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to communicate old stuff in a new way. And that's what I feel like I'm good at, and I feel like there's other people out there that I have also been inspired by that are good at that. I think of my colleague Jen Zart, for example, who's come out and done some really lively talks, or Chris Brennan, who's trying to bring Hellenistic astrology into a more modern, accessible readership. So, but there's in this class, the main thing that I'm passionate about is bringing personality, life, heart, and excitement and depth to the study of ancient astrology, and then trying to translate and integrate it into the kind of astrology that we do today. And that's a process that happens over the whole program that I teach, which is about a year long. So the course is structured like this. The first 6 months of the course, which I'll talk about the dates and times in a minute. First 6 months of the course is all theory. Planets, houses, signs, aspects. What did ancient astrologers think about these things? How are they totally different from what we think today? And how were these things used? Then we also talk about the history of astrology. We talk about the philosophical foundations of astrology, the esoteric metaphysical beliefs of ancient astrologers, how they are different from what astrologers tend to believe today. And we compare and contrast. We're not out to raise one up over the other, but we try to critically think about these things and work through them together. Then in the second 6 months, it's all moving toward application, which means I host live clients in the classroom so that you can see me using all of the things that I've been teaching in live client sessions, and you can see for yourself what the difference is between the kinds of readings, a modern reading and a more traditional Hellenistic style reading. And you can also see how I integrate concepts from both. So that's really great, because in a lot of the reason I did that is because I took a lot of astrology courses, and what I struggled with was that nobody was out there really saying, here's the technique and now watch me do it, right? It's like, no, the doing it part is somehow happens in private with no one there to coach you or talk you through it or show you how it's done. So that's something that I've, really taken the time to sort of polish in my course, is that there's a deep experience of hands-on learning where you get to see live readings and then go through workshop talking about them afterwards and break down the craft points of the reading. That's something that I got because I did an MFA in creative nonfiction, and every week throughout 2 years, I was meeting with people, sharing what we wrote and analyzing craft and breaking down the inner workings of the creative process. So I love doing that with people, and that's what we do in our classroom. We look at live readings that I do, and then we break them down together. So that's how the course is structured. As the course goes on, we slowly start to build also into how does this ancient stuff make sense in the modern world? And how can we blend or combine different things that we really like or love about modern form with ancient theory? So asteroids, outer planets, what do we do with those things? Or evolutionary astrology or psychological astrology, Jungian astrology, how do those things relate at all to ancient forms? And that also becomes bridged as we go through the course. The course meets on Sundays starting June 10th. It meets from noon Eastern time to about 2 Eastern time. So it's about 2 hours long. We meet 30 times on the year. So 30 courses over the course of a year. Plus there are 12 guest lectures. So I host 12 visiting professionals in the classroom so that you're getting basically an extra one quarter of your classes in the year are going to feature all sorts of topics and speakers who are very different from me and who have different voices and different approaches and different topics that they bring in that are sort of trying to help students also get connected to the broader world of astrology and all sorts of different interesting topics that we don't cover in the course, but that are definitely a positive part of your astrological development. So for example, next month, the 3 speakers coming out are my friend Shireen talking about Venus retrogrades, Nick Dagan-Best talking about Uranus entering Taurus, and Henry Seltzer from Astrograph talking about newly discovered planets. So it's a really ecumenical learning environment, even though you're going to get a really strong dose of ancient astrology. So that's how I've designed the course, and it's good for people who are total beginners because we start from the ground up. You're going to get the traditional form of beginner's astrology, but it's still good for beginners. But at the same time, people who are modern advanced students of astrology who have never learned anything about ancient astrology are also going to be total beginners because it's very, very different. So, and then, you'll also get to see, like, if you read my horoscopes, you'll often see that I blend ancient and modern forms together in how I write my dailies or how I speak to you about things like Venus and Uranus. I talk about Venus's exile in Aries, but we combine it with Uranus as a modern outer planet. So you'll get that kind of stuff throughout. So you have 12 guest speakers, 30 classes, meets on Sundays. I put it on Sundays because I have a lot of people from around the world who want to take the program but can't during the weeknights because it ends up being the middle of the night where they live. So, so this one's taking place on Sundays. It's kind of special. Now, there's certification option. You don't have to be certified. You can take a test at the end. It's 80% attendance live in the GoToMeeting webinars, or it's a test that you take at the end of the program. So that's how you get certification. What is certification? It's just me saying you came through my course successfully. You demonstrated that you have basic integrated knowledge of the core theory that we studied. I like to think of it mostly as a kind of psychic and energetic recognition as we are developing as astrologers. When you go through a course and you meet all the requirements, it's not like, it's not like there's a board somewhere that's saying, yes, you're an astrologer and you're not. Astrology doesn't really have that. So schools will give you certificates. What does it mean ultimately is more up to you. And I have students who have come through the program who are practicing full-time. I have students who come through who are practicing part-time, and I have students who come through who did it, and it was an amazing thing that they did for themselves in their own spiritual life. And those are the range of students that tend to come through the program. People who are interested, in other words, in just learning astrology for themselves, people who might want to start taking clients, make a little extra money on the side, or people who are really called and are going to go full-time. So, so that's the kind of range. And certification is a test and 80% attendance on the year. Jennifer says, what is the time zone for 10 to 12 class? It's from noon to 2. So that's Eastern. So noon to 2 would be 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. West Coast time, and then you kind of adjust if you're Mountain or Central. And then it's going to be 6 to 8 if you're in London. So it kind of we get a full coast, West Coast all the way to London can participate, and that's the idea. So registration and payment options. I've always been a donation-based business, which means that in the beginning, all I did was donation-based work. I took no set fees from people for quite a while before I started establishing some. And I had to because it was just too much work. It was too exhausting. But for my classes, these are the basic scales. If you need, the core price for the class is $1,600, which comes out to a little over $100 a month. Then you can break that into 12 monthly payments, and they're auto debited on the 15th of every month, starting in June. And that's pretty simple. We do it through our yoga studio's accounting system. However, if you want to pay for the whole class up front prior to the start date, it's only $1,200, which is the early bird rate. So if people pay it up front full, then you get the whole course. The payment plan is put in place because we try to cut down of people being on payment plans, because we have more erratic financial things that happen when people are on payment plans, and we're charged more through credit processing fees every month versus taking it all up front through, say, PayPal. So that's one of the main reasons we do that. However, if you're like, I can't afford either of those are way out of my range because I work part-time, I'm a single mom, I have really low, low income right now, or whatever the case might be. We also have need-based tuition, which you have to qualify for. You got to kind of tell us your situation, and it can't just be at like a discount. I can make enough to pay for the course, but I just don't have it right now. Well, then we just ask you to save up. But if you're in some financially difficult place, we never want anyone to be priced out. So you're welcome to do the sliding fee, which is somewhere between $67, $68 and $120. You can pick within that range. $120 is close to the full price for the course. So we're just giving the range of options for people. So some people will just pay $70 a month, and that's all they can afford because of their budget. We just ask people to reflect honestly on their budget and have a good reason for needing the need-based tuition at the moment. And if that's you, you can also contact us and let us know. So if you're interested in signing up, I'm going to put the course information in the box. It's nightlightastrology.com, and you go to the courses page and you'll see a registration thing. You can also email me if you're interested, or message me on Facebook. Nightlightastrology@gmail.com is my email address. Yeah, we start June 10th, so I hope to see some of you there. That's it for today. I hope that you all have a nice interaction with Venus and Uranus today. And I hope that you'll consider studying ancient astrology. If not with me, then check it out on your own. It's beautiful, deep, fascinating subject. All right, guys, have a nice day. Bye.